what's going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to a weird beginning to the 8th anniversary edition, by the way, of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you so much, as always, for watching, for listening. Appreciate you guys very, very much. Quick shout out to our sponsor for today's show, the Law Office of William Attar. Heard in the car, call William Attar, 444-4444. Call William Attar today to get the compensation that you deserve. We are, I don't know if we're live or not, to be honest with you.
I think we are. I'm going to go check it out.
All right. Well, we're certainly recording a podcast right now live from Sonny Red's 1841 Abbott Road in Lackawanna. I am joined by two very special guests on the 8th anniversary of Talking Buffalo. Well, two guests here. One couldn't make it. We'll get into that in a second. But to my left, from the Athletic, Matthew Fairburn. To my immediate left, my guy's been at more live shows with me by far than anyone else, man. Matt Parrino, Buffalo Bills beat reporter. Two of my favorite guys at what they do. Tim Graham, unfortunately, got sick, couldn't be here with us. What's going on, guys? How you doing?
I'm great.
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be
It's funny. We've already had the conversations here, folks. So, again, I don't know. This might have to be uploaded. Does this have to be uploaded afterwards? Is it streaming right now?
It's streaming. We're good. We're live.
Oh, it is streaming.
We're live.
All right.
I just retweeted it.
All right, it's streaming. We're good, I guess.
Get your act together, Pat.
Long story short, we had, I had some issues. I don't know what it is, this platform or whatever, but it was initializing forever, and the initial broadcast is a secondary one. I have no goddamn idea anyway, but
that one was much more interesting. The stuff Parrino was saying was crazy.
yeah, you guys
Can't
should have
believe
heard it, man.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you had the microphones muted, just in case we went
I
live.
couldn't believe what Pat said about Joe from Queens.
Oh,
Oh,
my
me
God.
either.
Amazing.
Dude,
Oh.
he's supposed to be your friend, man.
God.
Just kidding. Another love for my guy, Joe.
No,
I told you.
They're not lying.
We went to grade school together, elementary
Yeah.
school together.
Yeah.
He's a regular on the podcast. I see his clips in my YouTube short reel. Comes through. He's
What?
usually bitching about something. Brandon Bean would not be a fan because Joe's always bitching about something, right?
All right, here's the deal, folks. So this is the 8th anniversary episode of Talking Buffalo. Pretend it's like my birthday. I want one birthday present. Let's not mention Joe from Queens for the rest of the for the rest of the podcast. No, seriously though. So before we get into this show, I just wanted to say again, being the 8th year that I've been doing this now, exactly 8 years ago on this day, I was living in Bradenton, Florida. I don't want to say bored, but I was definitely homesick. I missed Buffalo. I was in Florida at that time for about maybe a year and a half. And you guys have lived in other places. Matt, you're not from Buffalo, you know what I mean? But you go back and forth. And I kind of got bored, not bored, but like I said, homesick. And I started looking into podcasts. They were a thing, but they're certainly not a thing like they are now, where so many people have a show. And I was blogging, and I wasn't very good at it, and I just got bored doing that. Plus, it was a lot of work. So I said I'd rather just talk. So I started watching YouTube videos and learning, and lo and behold, February 2018, Sal Capaccio was my first ever guest. We talked for like an hour and a half. It was a weekly show at the time. Then Tim Graham was on in week 2. Remember scoring Doran Dickerson from the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah.
He was my third guest, week 3, and we were off and running. And 8 years later, I'm so happy to still be able to do this show and to have two of my, and I mean this in all sincerity, two of my favorites here on the show is
Cut out the ball washing,
the
okay?
ball
Pat?
washing.
Just because
We
Sal
said no
Capaccio
joke.
wasn't available.
That's 100% right. 100% correct.
I mentioned Tim Graham. Tim was supposed to be with us tonight. Unfortunately, he got sick this week. Not the greatest timing either. I mean, he's just started a radio show on WGR this week with Brad Ryder, which they did one show, and that's something that I'm really looking forward to. It's supposed to be a couple-week thing, see how it goes. Hopefully, he'll be back real soon. I kind of want to get your thoughts. Let's start there, because we're going to talk some Bills, we'll talk some Sabres. I got some other stuff for you guys, but let's start with that radio show and just, you know, everything. Obviously, a lot of things going on at WGR with the Bills and the Sabres. But Tim and Brad Ryder, and you know Brad obviously very well, it's an interesting combo. And again, they only had one day. I'm hoping to get more out of that. And what are you looking for in a show like that?
Well, I think number one, Brad is decades-long experience in radio, and I think he brings. So many guys at that station. Like I talked to Zach Jones a lot. I've been on his show. Couple of the other guys, younger guys, they do a great job. But like, there's just something about like that guy that you grew up listening to, and for me, that was Brad Ryder in the area. Like, I really loved Brad and Jeremy's dynamic back when they did the night show together all those years ago. They had a fun vibe. It was a little bit different. And I think Brad brings a lot of that. Plus, like, he hasn't been doing it for a while, so I feel like you got to kind of, stretch your wings a little bit, like get back into the game.
Knock some rust off.
But knock some rust off. But, like, he's great at what he does, and I couldn't think of a more entertaining sidekick than Tim. I really miss the terrestrial radio show that he did. We all went on it. We were in studio with him a bunch. He's great at it, and he brings like a dynamic that you rarely get in local talk radio. I mean, as plugged in as he is, he's covered these teams in Western New York for decades now himself. There's just like a lot of time on task between those two guys.
It's a lot of credibility too, man. And this is, again, your colleague from The Athletic. And, I mean, I could say this. We were talking about this over the wings, which, by the way, fantastic wings and the pizza especially here. Everybody talks about the wings, and they're good, but
pizza's elite.
We're definitely a big pizza guy here at Sonny Red's. But there was a time where I would have been like, I don't think I'm going to be seeing Tim on WGR anytime soon. Just, I don't want to say conflict, just the way the business works, so to speak. But to see him on now with Brad, again, a colleague of yours at The Athletic, you know him as well as anybody. He's going to tell you what he thinks. He's not going to mince words when he does it either. And there's, for the people out there who say, which for the most part they're wrong, that WGR just serves the Bills and the Sabres, and that they can't say things and they're afraid to be critical. For the most part, that's not true anyway. But with somebody like Tim, he's gonna say what he wants or say what he thinks anyway.
Yeah, and he's going to have important people listening to him, right? There's, I think, important people with both teams that are going to be making sure they're keeping up with everything he's saying. I think Tim is maybe people know, maybe people don't, I don't know, but like his radio talent is not as front and center, obviously, as his writing, but
sure,
he's got a ton of experience in it. You mentioned he did the show. Is it 1270 The Fan?
Yes.
Is that the?
Yep.
Do I have the? I was literally on the show every week, and I forget the numbers. It's
I
been a while.
confuse it with WAC, which was a thing for a little while too.
Yeah,
WAC
with Brad
radio.
and Nick Mandola and Brad Ryder.
Yes.
But he, it was a weekly show, and he would line up great guests, and he was great at steering the conversation. He was on TSN for a while also, and so he's got a lot of experience. It's, I think, not the easiest thing to go from podcasting to be like, I'm going to host a radio show for 2 hours. Like, I have a real appreciation for the skill that guys like Jeremy and Joe and Chopin the Bulldog, like, running a show like that is a different deal, and Tim has that in his toolkit. So I hope that they get enough runway, like you said, to kind of, I don't know Brad as well, like he was out of the picture when I got to Buffalo, but I think we've met once or twice, and obviously listening to him, you can tell he's got kind of the chops for it. And so if they get the time to build the chemistry, that's what a show like that needs, is real chemistry between two guys who are, they've got a sense of humor, but they've also, like you said, Tim has the authority in this market that few people have.
I think it's a great opportunity, actually, with everything that's happened with WGR, with the Bills, One Bills Live now off the air. That's a good show for people who like that kind of TV or that kind of radio. And there's nothing wrong with it, but you're not going to get the most objective views on the team all the time or being critical. And I don't think they're supposed to be that. That's not what they're supposed to do. But to have another show on the air potentially with two guys, like I said, who are going to be completely objective in how they talk about the team is really interesting. And you also bring up a really good point, because people would think, well, if you have a podcast, it'd be easy to do a radio show. It's not, because you got to know when to get in and out of breaks. and you gotta, you have a certain amount of time for a certain segment before you gotta take certain calls. Whereas like a podcast, we're here shooting the shit right now at Sonny Red's. I'm telling Parrino that we're gonna be an hour or less than an hour. He knows I'm full of shit, and if I am, really, who cares? If it's an hour, if it's an hour and 4 minutes, well, you care. But most people don't. Is what I'm saying, as opposed to like radio, where it's like, you gotta
Well,
get
getting in and out of breaks is one thing, but it's also just like, I feel like the rhythm of a show is a little bit different when you're on the radio, right? Like you're covering, I mean, in the case of what, Jeremy and Joe, are they 6 to 10?
Yeah.
So that's 4 hours. And so you're doing that every day. You're filling 20 hours a week. Is a lot different than even if you podcast every day for an hour.
Right.
And you have people, like when you podcast, people are, for the most part, they're coming to you. Like they found you for one reason or another. They're coming. They're ready to sit down. Okay, this podcast is an hour. You got people turning the dial. They're like, let me see what this Tim Graham and Brad Ryder show's about. If the 5 minutes they listen to are, not right, they might flip it and do something else with their time. So like, it is a different skill set that I think both of those guys have. And I'm just glad that WGR is at least trying some different things instead of just immediately going to like, we'll throw Jim Rome on or Colin Cowherd. And, people can listen to those if they want to. Let's try something, get that local flavor. And that's a big gap of time in the middle of the day that in other markets, like, it can be a big show, for a station.
I just hope it works out because
I think just one thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the objectivity conversation that you kind of like poked at a little bit there, and like, of course, like I worked for the UFC, so I know what it's like to be on the company side of things, what you're allowed to do and say, and they're in a certain box. But I'd even say across like the media landscape, people not associated with the team, there's like this sense of differentiation between like who's more objective, who's less objective. I also think my observation sometimes is that when you're, and this isn't Tim or anybody in specific, but like I've heard people when they're like talking about picking the games, right? 5 people are picking the games on a TV show, for instance. Like I have to pick against the Bills because everybody is picking the Bills. Like that's not being objective. You're not actually giving what you think is going to happen in the game. You just want it to appear like, oh, I'm not a homer, or not everybody on the show is a homer. And I think that's a funny thing. Like I grew up rooting for the team, right?
Yeah.
I don't cover the team in that way. And I think sometimes when people hear like a take that I have that might be like letting Bean off the hook, letting Sean off the hook, letting Josh off the hook, whatever the case may be, I like to push back at times and say, you're also not taking into account how piss poor this operation was for decades.
Sure.
And you're not using that lens when evaluating what's happening here. We can have 2 conversations at one time, and I think there's objectivity in both of those stances. But sometimes I just think that, like, sometimes people want to be objective for objective's sake, and I think objectivity's sake, and I think that's a dangerous road to go down. You just open up a thought that I've had for a while because, even like we were talking about Joe from Queens, right? Mm-hmm. And I listen to your show sometimes, and I was listening to him the other day, and you brought him up at the beginning of the show, so I'll bring it up. He calls me Mafia.
He asked for one thing.
I know. We're bringing it up.
That's all right.
He calls me Mafia Matt, and I would love to have like a conversation with him at some point to talk about that, because I really, truly look at myself all the time and analyze what I write, what I say. And listen, there's often times when I go back and be like, you know what? I think a little bit differently on that than I did even a week ago, with more time to like think about it, more time to talk to people about it. That's another thing. When we're doing these podcasts in the moment and reacting to news and like everything's in this 24-hour news cycle, can I reserve the right to have an opinion and have that opinion change over time? It should be part of the conversation. So I just think like the objectivity thing is like, that's a serious thing in our business. Like when you question somebody's objectivity, especially when it's something that I put at the center of what I do every day.
I completely understand that. And I also would say, and I'm not just saying this because you're sitting next to me, I mean this, ask anybody, I've said it many times. go throw on shout after the Atlanta loss or after the Houston loss. You're as critical in that moment of this team as literally anyone who's covering this team because they deserved it at that time. So I'm not saying whether it's Joe from Queens or Billy Bob or whoever. I don't know people who would say, well, Matt's not critical of the team. Matt's not criticizing the team. I personally don't know anybody who would say that. I understand what you're saying, though, about how when you say the word objectivity, that it could be a really slippery slope as well. And again, I like Chris Brown and I love Eric Wood and I love One Bills Live for what it is. You know what I mean? But the same token, Matt Parrino or Matthew Fairburn with the Sabres, you're not working for the team.
Right.
And they're working for the team. There's just some areas that I feel like they're not going to go to.
Here's the thing. Here's where I'm really getting at with all this. I struggle with the idea that we somehow have to pound the table for like this just inept organization, apparently, that has made the playoffs 8 of the last 9 years after not going for 17 straight.
Sure, yeah.
In a market where we know the baggage, we know the history. To sit here and argue that there hasn't been a bunch of incredible success is not being objective, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you 1,000%.
I think you get at a good point in terms of, I think about it as like, I don't know if you've heard the term like audience capture, where you're so focused on your audience and the feeling of your audience that you're trying to move with that, right? And so like, to your point about being, you said objective, but I'd use the word like critical, being critical for the sake of being critical because you're like, somebody says it's the time to be critical, right? Or the fan base is really pissed off, so I need to be critical to match that energy. And there's something to feeling the energy of the fan base and kind of, leaning into some of their feelings at times. But I think the truth is number one, right? And so if the truth is letting Bean off the hook to the best of your knowledge on whatever topic it may be, that's just the truth. And you almost have to remove yourself. Like, that's the objectivity, is to the truth, not whether you're being, and people mess that up all the time where they're like, oh, if you're pro Bean, you're not objective. It's like, well, if the truth is that, like, to the best of that you know it, that you should be pro Bean in a certain situation, that's just being objective in a different way. So, I think there can be, especially covering the Sabres the last few years, it's like there's this hunger for critical coverage.
Right.
It's like, go harder at the team. And it's like, I feel like I went plenty hard at them over the last few years, but it's like when there were situations that call for the opposite, my job is to see it through clear eyes. I'm not a fan. If you're a fan, you're going to be seeing red when they lose. And I'm not, so I can.
Like me, I'm a fan.
Right, so you can see through it in a different way, and you hopefully can get at objectivity that way. But it's a really gray area now, I feel like, for a lot of people that cover these teams, and social media is a big part of it. You're trying to, I feel like the danger people fall into more is, I think, readers, listeners, they think, oh, you're just trying to protect your access. You're just trying to protect your X, Y, and Z. And if you look at some national guys, they're protecting sources a lot of times, for sure. But I think on the local level, it's a lot of it becomes less about, like, Boyko's not going to go around cutting credentials because you write a critical column. Like, it takes a lot more than that. I think it's hard to remove yourself from, if I write this, it's going to be a rough day on Twitter.com, right? Yeah. If I write this, it's going to be, or if I pick against the Bills, or if I, whatever. That's what I think people can fall into the trap of, is like, even if you think you're being objective, it's like social media distorts your brain a little bit sometimes with that. So, I don't know, that's just some of the things that I think about when I'm working. I'm
so glad you brought this all up. So for people who are watching this, whether you're watching this live right now or you're watching or listening at any time Thursday or whenever, fitting that, being the 8th year anniversary of doing this show, these last 5 to 6 minutes are the conversations that I love more than anything else. There's a lot of great Bills, and there's a good amount of Sabre podcasts out there where you say hello and you start talking Bills, you start talking Sabres. I think when this podcast is at its best is when I have guys like you on the show and these are the topics that kind of, peeling back the curtain a little bit and talking to fans about. So I love this stuff, man. So I really do appreciate you guys hitting on
it's
it.
hard. I'm talking about all this. You gotta be careful. Like I remember walking into that press conference for Terry and Brandon, and really feeling like put your gladiator helmet on and get ready to go into this thing and bring the heat, because that's what's being called for. Meanwhile, if you really go back and chronicle all the press conferences this season and really listen to the questions that are being asked, if you were to go into that Terry presser and think that I wasn't going to be one of the ones that asked tough questions, you haven't been watching.
I agree.
I asked the most awkward question to Joe Brady a month ago, and I don't know if many people picked up on it. I put out a YouTube clip about it. I said, is it fun playing wide receiver for you? Because it's from the outside looking in, it looks like it's like miserable.
Yeah.
And you could tell as soon as I asked it, he was like, you are really asking me this right now? It was uncomfortable, and I let it sit. Like there's this thing in journalism where when you're interviewing somebody, sometimes you got to play a little chicken with the person you're talking to, right? It's called dead air chicken. And what you do is you ask a question. If they don't answer right away, are you going to be the one that breaks the dead air, or do you just let it sit there and just? And I had to, and he kind of asked, like, he thought about it for a second. He's like, what do you mean? And so I had to follow up, but I followed up with like a one sentence. I didn't move the goalpost. I didn't like do anything, and it was awkward, but it yielded a really good answer. And that happens all the time in the room, that like, I don't know, like people just want the viral moments too, and that's another part.
They do, and that's another layer of it where, again, covering the Sabres, it's like, you're in the locker room every day, and so like they have a really bad loss, and it's like hockey's different too, because you're just in there so damn much, and they play so many games that like it's like, can this live to fight another day? Can I get at this tomorrow at the skate instead of right after the game? But you're right, a lot of people will want, especially in those big press conferences, the Doug Whaley one set a bar, right?
Yeah.
Like that one, a few of us that were in that room were texting before, like, is this going to be a Whaley level type of press conference? But you do have to guard yourself against, like, again, the goal is not to ask the question that the most people on Twitter are going to be fist pumping about, or just be reacting to, right? Whether some people are pissed because it was too rude or too direct or whatever, or some people are really excited because you got them, you pinned them to the wall. The goal is to get the information,
right,
the interesting answers, and get at some version of the truth, which is a distorted version in a press conference. But you do have to guard against that when you're feeling, again, the emotion of social media, the fan base, and you're like, wow, people really want us to pin their ass to the wall here. Like, what am I gonna add? Like,
I can't tell off Brandon Bean like you really want me to.
Well, and
just so you know, even if that was my objective, it's not what the setting calls for.
It's also just not. It's not professional. It's not interesting.
No.
In the way that, like, it needs to be interesting for us to do our jobs. To be like, people would ask me all the time, why don't you ask Kevin Adams like why he still has a job? And it's like,
what's he gonna say?
Like, what do you expect him to say? Like, that's just gonna create unnecessary, like,
Right.
And I don't know. Maybe it was getting to a point where maybe I could have pulled that question
right
at some point, but like. It almost, the Whaley press conference did sort of almost get to that point with Bucky Gleason asking, like, what exactly do you do here? Like, if you're not privy to any of it. But it was a reasonable follow-up to a guy who was claiming to have sort of no knowledge of a lot of the stuff that was going on. But, yeah, you have to be careful on leaning too much into. But like I said, there are times, like when the team is winning, you want to bring people along and add to that ride in some way. Mm-hmm. Bring them into the room, bring them into how guys are feeling. Like with the Sabres lately, it's like, let's peel back the curtain on some of these players and how they're getting here and how this winning is happening. But when it's the negative side of things and people that's the hard part, when everything's going good and it's like, damn, there's actually a hard question that needs to be asked here. everybody on Twitter is going to hate this, but like kind of got to ask this.
Yeah.
Or the guy talking's going to hate this, but like
Right.
kind of have to ask this.
Right.
And like sometimes I feel like I fall too much into the trap of like, this needs to be asked. I've got to ask it, when sometimes it's like, all right, if nobody's going to ask it, then I'll just let this sit and maybe find a time one-on-one to get at that in a different way, because if nobody wants to ask it, then it's free game elsewhere to get it on your own, you know?
Sounds like to me, between the two of you, that one of the challenges of being a professional journalist, wow, it's pretty rowdy here. at
People
Sonny
are
Red.
very excited about our takes.
Yes.
They
They're
agree.
very,
They
very,
agree.
they're excited. They love the sports
This media
so
discussion is firing
They
the
absolutely
people up.
love it, but it feels to me like part of the challenge of being a professional sports journalist is not giving into what everyone else thinks you should be asking. Like you were talking about, like you go on Twitter 10 minutes before a press conference. I've been guilty of it. I'm not going to lie. Before Bill's press conference, I'm like, boy, I hope somebody in the media asks this. I've done that before. You know
It's
what I mean?
okay. You're a fan. You
I am
should
a
be
fan.
doing that.
And I'm not saying that people like yourself and other people who have opinions about like sometimes those are good questions. I'm not saying like I have a badge, I know better, I know what needs to be asked, but it's like I'm also in the process of managing a relationship and managing, trying to get information in different ways.
Sure.
And so, I mean, there's a lot of times I sit there in a press conference and think, do I want to ask this question about something I'm writing about and just broadcast what I'm writing about?
Right.
Like, is the answer going to be that good and help my
Right,
story that
yeah.
much, or should I just not ask this and, find the information elsewhere or find a different opportunity? I mean, that happens all the time. So press conferences are weird. Like when I first started in, I guess, 2014 and at the pro level, they weren't broadcast live either.
Right.
So like that component, adds a whole performance element to it for a lot of people that is certainly not why I walk into those rooms. Like I don't view it as a performance, but there's people in the business who do, and like the sound of their own voice. So yeah, it's a balancing act. But people do know, like people like yourself, like you have good ideas about what questions should be, and so that's like social media. You get ideas, you get feedback from fans that is valuable, but it's hard to filter. From
I've
the
learned the
nonsense.
intricacies of it too, though, from talking to so many people, who do this for a living. I've learned a lot of the little things too that you guys are talking about with it. One guy that, you both covered, who is no longer the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, and it's been, a minute since we've talked, certainly on this show. So I want to kind of get an opinion from each of you here on Sean McDermott. Were you surprised that it happened when it happened? What was your reaction? And in your case, Matt, like, how much did you see the growth? Because Matt was there, early on, but now you've been covering the Sabres. You've been there since 2018. He's changed a lot. You know what I mean? Like the Sean McDermott that I saw when Matthew Fairburn was talking to him and asking questions at the press conferences isn't necessarily the same Sean McDermott that I've seen over the last couple of years as well. But just kind of like your overall reactions about Sean McDermott as a coach and what you've gotten to know from him as a person.
There was a story on The Athletic from Pompeii a little bit like a month before the end of the season, and it was a full takeout on Sean McDermott, the likes of which I've never read before. I've never read a story, and you could correct me because you covered him longer than me, where his wife was quoted in the story.
I feel like she's been quoted, but yeah, it's not often.
It's rare, right?
It's not often. Maybe in some of those early ones when it was like he just got hired and
Okay.
the origins of Sean McDermott, it's possible. I can't say for sure, though.
That took me aback a bit. It was such a good story. There was a couple of really good anecdotes in there. But in hindsight, wasn't it so strange how he was almost like selling his relationship with Josh Allen? Like in that story? Like it felt very... And again, I haven't talked to Sean about this, and I would love to ask him, but we don't have access to him now. It felt very performative in a way, like almost like defending what you've done here. Because I think if you were to tell me the story of what happened this season, and that Brandon Bean was the one that ended up staying and getting promoted, and Sean was the one that was fired, and I take just my observations from 8 years on the relationship between Josh and Sean, from what I could see, and Josh and Brandon, I'm not overly surprised with that outcome. And I also think the public nature of which Sean McDermott started criticizing Brandon this season played into all of this as well. And Josh Allen's never going to say it, but how did that play with him? And is this not something that maybe, and this is not sourced anything. This is me just reading between the lines and guessing. But I have a hard time believing that after all of this, it was just that one moment in the locker room where there's an epiphany to decide to fire Sean McDermott. There had to be more. And Terry also kind of said in his press conference that I'm not a guy where you can backdoor your way into an outcome. And didn't it feel like Sean McDermott was kind of playing the game a little bit with how he was kind of pinning this season indirectly on Brandon in a lot of ways?
Yeah.
I'm intrigued, and I'd like your take on this, on the idea of letting Brandon's vision for the team play out. Because I think whether or not Brandon would say it, Sean had much more say and influence on the players that have been brought in over the years than anybody even really knows. That's just my sense.
I mean, Sean essentially picked Brandon, right? Like, Sean got here first. He got control of the 53-man roster as a condition of getting the job. So he wrestled that away from Doug Whaley. Had a great first offseason, right, with some franchise pillars and great draft. Trading the Mahomes pick aside, like, they did really well in that offseason. And so I think your point, like, the idea that the same man who did that when he got the job, and when he got the job, he was not, like, the hottest candidate, right? He was a good candidate, but he wasn't, like, Ben Johnson.
No wow factor.
He wasn't Ben Johnson
That
who
was the
could come
Shanahan
in.
cycle, right?
Yeah.
Right?
He wasn't Ben Johnson where he could come in and be like, I need X, Y, and Z. So for a guy that was wired that way, to believe that over the course of 9 years, with all the success, that he just said, nope, it's all you, Brandon. You pick the players. I don't buy it. I just don't. And I think your point about the way he behaved, particularly this season, some of the comments he made, it's like you could tell he was defending himself a little bit, and that quote from Terry was the one that stood out to me, where it's like, I'm not a big power play guy. You know, if I sense you're on a power play, you're out.
You're out.
People looked at that and said, you know, he's defending Brandon Bean. Brandon Bean didn't make a power play, but I thought maybe the other guy was, and maybe he, you know, sensed a little bit of that. If you had asked me when I was covering the Bills on a day-to-day basis, if there's ever a power struggle, who's going to win, I would have said Brandon Bean, because he's a much better people person, like infinitely better. As the years went on, and I was still covering them occasionally, but I was more removed from it, I thought Sean's power might be growing, like the more they won, and he's the public face of it all, right? And it's easier to poke. It's easy to poke holes in some of Brandon Bean's roster decisions because a lot of them haven't worked out. But Terry Pagula clearly saw through, I think, some of what McDermott was trying to do the last couple of years. And when you bring it all back to the defense, like, it was the question I was asking at the end of every season. I remember asking Brandon a couple of years ago at the end of season press conference, rattling off some of the stats in elimination losses of the defense and saying, you know, what's your confidence that Sean's the coach that can get you guys there? And he defended him and all that. And I maybe could have asked the question a little bit better, but it was a question. I wrote a story a couple years ago when Granado was spinning in the wind, and the McDermott question was real. And I wrote about the two of them. It's like, Pagula's standing by both these guys, despite the fact that patience is wearing thin in the fan base. And it's years later. So I guess what surprised me about it was how much of what Sean did worked on the public. When he was fired, that's what I was surprised by. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend I woke up that morning thinking, Sean's going to get fired today. There was a surprise element. But the real surprise was like 24 hours later looking and saying, wow. People are like all backing Sean McDermott here. Like, that doesn't seem to line up with like what I thought people's feelings were on this whole situation. And that goes to show that how it happened, right? There's always nuance to these things. It's like how it happened, the optics of Brandon Bean getting promoted, the press conference, going with Joe Brady, who's not really, the rest of the candidates in the cycle weren't superstars. There wasn't a Ben Johnson out there. I think that played into some of the angst, but I was shocked. Like 40,000 signatures on a petition to bring him back? I was like,
I think that ended up going up to like 80.
That's ridiculous.
I was like,
way,
let's
man.
rein it in here, people. We're losing the plot. Like,
that is borderline embarrassing, by the way. And listen, there's 31 other fan bases who probably do stupid shit, but that's kind of they had a psychologist or grief counselor ready to talk to people. It's like, what are we doing here, man? But you do bring up a good point. Are you surprised, both of you, at how villainized Brandon Bean became in 1 year? Now, in fairness, some of it, like the WGR thing, we've been in that horse a ton, but it was a thing. The WGR thing, that's a legitimate thing, and I can understand the criticism. If nothing else, he certainly put a bullseye on that room's back. You know what I mean? The wide receiver room. But I remember when you guys were covering the press conference right after the trade deadline, it was weird. He was like almost complaining, like borderline. I hate to use the word whining, but he almost was it. He couldn't get a deal done, and then we see after McDermott gets fired, Stevie Johnson's got a photo of it. Calls him Judas. Mm-hmm. We see Littlefinger references all over the place from Game of Thrones. Backstabber Bean. I'm like, it's kind of. I don't feel like he deserves that. So we're really clear on that, man. I'm surprised.
So it's hard,
Big Baller Bean with the glasses feels dead now, and now everybody wants to get a piece of this guy. It's weird.
He's one big trade away from the memes come flying back. I will say
hope
that.
so.
But I think sometimes I think Brandon is very media aware, like media trained. I think he went to school for journalism, right? Like back in the day.
Communication.
For a minute.
Sort, yeah.
So I think he has like an eye for it, a sense for it, and that's important. I mean, media relations is something that is important. Mm-hmm. When you don't understand the mediums that you're conveying information on, problems start. And I think that like his biggest misstep was misinterpreting who that message went out to. It wasn't to Jeremy and Joe that took that, this isn't fantasy football, Jeremy, or this isn't fantasy football, Joe. He was talking to Pat Moran. Yeah. You're the one who took it. Or Joe, Donna, Billy, Sally in the bars that were listening that day. Like, you're telling me I'm too stupid to say you should have a better wide receiver room, which, by the way, I think across the board, the football world was saying. But I think sometimes when maybe you've fallen short in an area and you're being heavily criticized on it over and over and over again, that was the outburst. And so I think, I wonder, and I've never asked the question just like this, but I've talked to him about this ad nauseum. If you could take it back, would you go back and like change it at all? Anything about it? Like your tone, how you went about it? Because the big thing that's been talked about, and I think is fair, is the media tour that followed that. It wasn't just that happened and it went away.
Yep.
Oh, no.
He went on McAfee.
The team did a whole video and used that as the open. Like it was, I think Brandon Bean, like when I was covering him, and beyond that, really probably up until that moment, is incredibly good at media. Like, and as I said before, like the better people person than Sean McDermott by far, in my opinion. He slipped up a little bit this year. Like I don't know what it was where he lost a little bit of that sharpness. Certainly that was one of the moments, but I think the trade deadline was another but part of me just thinks he is who he is, and he's honest and he's genuine, and some of that, maybe it's insecurity, whatever it was, came through. He's definitely got, like most of these guys, like a thin skin at times, right? I think most people I've covered, it's like they'll take issue with something at some point and want to talk to you about it, right? Like, and he's no different. But it was it goes back a little bit to our conversation about objectivity and criticism and this and that. Like, it can move really fast, and that's why you have to try to stay level-headed on it, because there were times when he was big baller Bean that I thought, you can't touch this guy. You can't criticize him, even though maybe they've done something wrong here or there. Right. Same goes for McDermott. It's like, well, look, he pulled this team out of the drought and X, Y, and Z, and how can you go after him? And it's like, well, the bar's a little different now. And so I think Brandon Bean's tone got him in a little trouble on a few of those. But to your point, that can change quick too, because he did a little podcast tour over the summer. He was on your show, and
it was a good interview.
And I think people were back on board with Brandon Bean. People were on board in general. They were like, yeah, Jeremy and Joe, take that,
Yes, that's the part of it that gets lost in all this, was like the immediate fan reaction. You talk about like the back and forth. People were like, yeah, he dunked on those guys. Way to go, Brandon.
Hell yeah, they were like,
it's 100% true.
And that's why I say you can't follow the mob, because the mob's going to change, and nobody's paying attention to what, like, one individual in the mob, they can change their mind 20 times or whatever. But that was like the groundswell of support. I thought when it happened, it was super interesting. I was like, I love that he did this, because it's such an interesting media moment and talking point and human reaction from a general manager that you don't see. But I had this conversation with a few people, and I might have had it on the podcast with Baker, but like, it was not that much different than the Palm Trees press conference from Kevin Adams. It really was not. You could argue that Brandon Beans was a little bit worse. Like, he was a little bit more aggressive, and I actually thought within the answer, it's one thing if you want to say like, hey, I'm the GM, I've been doing this, I got it covered, I thought within the answer, like, he was making some false equivalencies about like, oh, my offense got X, Y, and Z. But it's like, yeah, when you were eliminated, though, how many catches did you have from a wide receiver? Or when you needed to move the ball through the air, could you do it? Like, I don't care how many points you averaged in the regular season. Like, what did it get you in the end? But I look at that Kevin Adams press conference, and I think in a different light, in a different moment in time, if they had won more, if he had more success, he had more cachet like Brandon Bean had, it would have been perceived in a totally different way, which, gets to what we were talking about earlier.
I have one final thought on this.
Go ahead.
And it just, I never like put all the pieces of the puzzle together. But how much of that interaction was maybe born of frustration on Brandon's end for constantly having to defend how bad the defense was year in and year out, right? Like in these playoff losses. I sensed last year, I remember at the owners' meetings and the combine, like, and this is just little observations. I'm not breaking any news. There just felt like a disconnect between him and Sean. And they always did everything together. They did things together. At the combine, we would or at the owners' meetings, we would sit at the table at the media party, and we would all talk as a group, right? That's what it's for. At the combine, they would like be walking around the facility together. Everything seemed disjointed last year, and maybe should have seen some of the writing on the wall for some of maybe what predated that fallout. But I think when you think about him coming out so hot about the offense, like, what do you want? I almost felt like in the back of his head, what he couldn't say is, what do you want me to do? We can't stop anybody, and we keep scoring 30 points, and he couldn't say that. But I think maybe that's where it was born from. I don't know.
And one last thing, too. I'll say, in fairness, this was a group that was looking better. Like, the prospects for that room looked a lot better when Brandon Bean did what he did, which, by the way, was unprovoked. And he got on the air, and he wanted to get after it. And my personal opinion is, kind of rally some fan support too, because like you said, people were dogging on Jeremy and Joe when it happened, not Brandon Bean. But I mean, you signed Josh Palmer.
Brandon Bean was very high on Elijah Moore.
Yeah,
and
he shouldn't have been.
I think there was maybe a little disconnect there too.
Could be.
Like maybe that they wanted more from Elijah Moore at the front office level, and the coaching staff wasn't putting them, because remember early in the season, Elijah Moore was up, down.
Yeah.
They were putting Curtis Samuel back in. the revolving door at receiver last year didn't do them any favors. But when you're pinning all of your hopes to what's for the most part been a disappointing former second-round pick, I can understand fans' frustration.
Well, that's what's fascinating about the whole, how it all came together and where we sit today and how they move forward. It's like, okay, it was the coaching staff's fault that Elijah Moore wasn't good. Who was calling plays? The guy who's now in charge, right?
Right.
And so if you're to, like the people that are skeptical, right, in order to defend what's happening moving forward and have some optimism about it, you have to place a lot of this at McDermott's feet. It's like, well, McDermott was too heavy-handed with the personnel department.
Yep.
And so he made too many of the picks or wanted too specific of types. And then you also have to say that he was too heavy-handed with Joe Brady. And, well, he wanted a certain type of offense. And so now it's like Brandon Bean gets to be a different kind of general manager maybe now that McDermott's gone, and Brady is going to be a different offensive coach than he was before. Maybe that's true. I do think McDermott had a tendency to be a pretty heavy-handed personality, but even I would say that you're stretching a long way to justify where you've landed, which is why I get the frustration from people. It's not just they didn't want to see Sean McDermott fired. It's that they wanted to see what the plan was. And this can all be fixed with a good offseason and, a 6-0 start. People are right back on board and forgetting all about that petition, right?
Well, the Bills were 4-0 last year, and nobody was bitching about the wide receiver room until Sunday night in New England when they lost. I did find it interesting, Joe Brady's introductory press conference, when he said the best thing that ever happened to Keon Coleman is I'm his head coach, which got me thinking, well, you've been his offensive coordinator for the first 2 years as well. To your point,
is that
suggesting that Sean McDermott was holding Keon Coleman back? I mean, I'm asking as a legitimate question. Is that possible? Joe Brady thought he can get more from Keon, but Sean wasn't having it, because that's the only rationale I can think of, besides, naturally trying to talk your player up, which you should. But
listen, I've said multiple times on my show over the years, the number one culprit in the failures of Kyer Elam and Cody Ford, in my opinion, was Sean McDermott. Because when you bring in a young player like that, and I get it, everything is earned. Like, that's so easy to say, but you're in a business where first-round draft picks play. They just play as their rookie year. You treat them like a baby, you're going to get what ends up being a baby. And both of those guys never really matured into anything, because you told Kyer Elam from the jump, you're not good enough. We're going to play a 6th-round draft pick over you. And sure, sometimes people respond to that, but if you were around that guy for 5 months as a head coach, didn't you know that wasn't going to be what was going to unlock him? If anything, that was going to potentially derail him. And did you want to derail him? Was that a Brandon Bean pick? You start going down all of these roads, and it gets interesting.
What gets me about a Kyer Elam, and this is where it's hard to split the blame, and figure out who gets how many pieces of the pie. But I'm sorry, you cannot tell me that the head coach of the football team, again, the guy who wrestled 53-man control before he ever coached a game, the guy who coached defensive backs, did not sign off on the pick of a cornerback in the first round. Coaches do that across the league regardless of position. This is his bread and butter. And so if he wants to pretend, that wasn't my pick, but Benford, again, it all just starts to get way too convenient. And that's what happens in the aftermath of all these things is, it's really convenient that Joe Brady wanted to throw to all these wide receivers, but Sean McDermott wouldn't let him. Or it's really convenient that Brandon Bean wanted to make good picks, but Sean wanted the players who weren't any good. It's like, now you get to prove it. But I would say, I thought it was time for Sean McDermott to be fired. I thought it was past time. There were some people that saying, this is too early. I was like, this is too late. Yeah. This is past time. You're on the back nine of Josh Allen's career now. And the chances don't necessarily get better from here. You might have missed a window. But at the same time, I'm trying to guard myself from being oh, now he's fired and people want to heap all the blame on him, let's do it. It's like, let's, kind of try to find like I said, try to find the truth, right? Like the closest version of it, because everybody's going to have their version. The fact of the matter is, these guys were working in tandem on a lot of things, and there was definitely splits and divides. They're two very different people.
Yeah.
They're two very different people, Brandon Bean and Sean McDermott. And Joe Brady is more a personality match for Brandon Bean, I think. And that was something that struck me as interesting whenever I covered them. It was like, Brandon Bean, like you would notice it when you were outside the building, when you were at the combine, when you're at the owners' meetings, and you see them among their peers, and it's like, who's Sean walking around with and who's Brandon walking around with? And it's not that the GM and head coach are always hanging in the same circles on certain teams, but it's like, these guys just seem very different in terms of how they spend their free time, like what they consider fun, like, and the way they're wired is a little bit different. So I think it is actually correct to give Brandon Bean the chance to hire his own coach, something he never got to do. I don't think if he had the chance, to hire a coach, if it was the other way around, we don't know that it would have been Sean McDermott, right? So now he gets the chance to hire his own guy. He chose to go with a guy in-house, which is an interesting call. But at least now you get a little bit of clarity, and it's like, okay. And even the promotion in some ways removes the excuses, right? I know the optics sucked. It's like you're promoting this guy on the same day you fire somebody else. Placing the blame on one guy, but it does give some clarity for the rest of us to say, okay, this is your show now. You're the president of football ops, and let's see how you run this thing.
Live here at Sonny Red's 1841 Abbott Road. Matt Parrino, Matthew Fairburn. Just a few more minutes left here in the show, but
Yeah, right.
no, I'm serious. I'm semi-serious. Before going on, I also want to plug the podcast too, because these guys are co-hosts of two incredible podcasts. Matthew Fairburn, of course, the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show, which is the best Sabres podcast, period. The only thing I don't like about that show is that his name comes before yours. I think it's bullshit.
I think
Chris
it sounds
Baker,
better.
Chris is a jerk. No, I should have texted him to come out, actually. I should have. And then, of course, shout. Matt Parrino, Ryan Talbot do an incredible job. And I want to plug one specific episode. I think I might have even texted you after I watched it that day. Ryan wasn't on it. I love Ryan, but Ryan wasn't on this one. You had Mitch Morse on not long after the Sean McDermott firing. And I was blown away watching the show and how much Mitch Morse was vulnerable. Like he was struggling to come up with words. And he is a very well-spoken man. He has a podcast. I love his show, too.
He's a good Mizzou man.
I know. I know you like that.
He was really struggling, though, with Sean getting fired.
He texted me after the show.
He was talking about the person. Yeah, he was apologizing to you on the air that he wasn't speaking well. I'm like, I actually loved it.
I'm like, dude, where we landed, though, it's not always about, like, those moments of vulnerability. It's more about where we landed. And by the end, like, there's some really good context to everything that he shared that only he could share.
I felt
as
it.
somebody that's been in that room, who's also, by the way, like, can you imagine being somebody like Mitch Morse who has, like, this affinity for both of those guys and, like, the optics of everything that you were talking about and trying to parse through all of that personally and emotionally. And when I texted him, hey, do you want to do a podcast? Like, I didn't think he'd want to do it that day, but like, hey, let's get together this week, talk about it. He was ready to go right then. Like, he was like, he wanted to talk about it. Like, it was cathartic in a way. Mitch is great. It's so interesting. Like, I had a really good relationship with Mitch in the locker room when I covered him, but we've actually become like friends, right? Like, shooting the shit, friends, like on the other side of things. I ran into him at Disney World. Disney brings everybody together. He was texting me from his trip in Disney this last week. And like, it is kind of cool, like, to be able to see, like, I've now covered the team for, this will be my 9th season upcoming. And there's guys that have finally started to, like, cycle out, right? Like, guys that have been part of regimes. And, like, you can have different conversations and you build different rapport in the locker room. I know that's one of the things you want to talk about. That was one of the ideas I sent you over because I think that's so interesting, like, navigating an NFL locker room. I still sometimes go in there and feel uncomfortable or uneasy about navigating all the conversations and the people and the personalities. And I was just thinking about it today, like when I texted you, like, it's got to be crazy to go from that to whatever it's probably like in an NHL locker room.
What are the biggest differences when you're doing that?
It's funny because I get a taste of it when I go over to Bill's once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
you know, do the occasional story, and it's a lot different. Like, I think the biggest thing is that the NFL locker room is so big that it feels like I could have like 4 conversations in there on a given day, and like nobody knows besides me and the guy that I had that conversation, and that they'll say stuff that's a lot crazier than anything you hear in hockey locker room most of the time. Like, and the hockey locker room, you're in there, I guess it's probably a similar amount. It's more because you're in there post game and you're in there for morning skate, but it's so much smaller. And like the Sabres locker room is an actual circle.
Right.
And so I'm talking to a guy, and his neighbors in the locker room are hearing every word of the conversation a lot of the times. And there's definitely like, there's not as many people there, right? So it's like a fishbowl almost. And it's like like in the NFL locker room, you can just like be in the corner with somebody and like building, you know, a certain type of relationship that you're like, okay, like this guy isn't looking around the corner to say like, who's watching what I'm saying, right? Like, and that's probably the biggest difference is like guys in the NFL locker rooms, it just feels like they don't care as much what they're saying, how it's going to be perceived. They're more loose-lipped, and it takes more work to get that out of the hockey guys, and you almost have to, being on the road is huge in hockey. Like there's hardly anybody on the road, and so you get a much different version of the guys, and you get way more relaxed conversations, and the relationship building on the road is critical to doing the job compared to at home, where maybe the guy's in a rush to get home to, you know, his family or whatever. Like when there's fewer of you on the road, it's easier. But yeah, the dynamic's different. I mean, the hockey guys are, I don't know if I prefer dealing with one to the other. Like they both have their benefits. Like there's not too many guys that I've encountered in hockey where I would be like, oh, that guy was a real pain to deal with. And in football, you know, in a 53, really like a, 70-person locker room with the practice squad, there's going to be those guys. Like that's a lot of people. And I covered the NFL a lot longer, so you're going to run into those guys. And there's bigger personalities, I think. There's something in hockey that's like, there's still too much in the culture of like, don't step out and show your personality too much. Like, stay in line with the team and just kind of toe the company line a little bit. But in football, it just feels like a lot of guys, especially now, are just, they'll say whatever.
You cover football. You, of course, came from UFC. Do you guys still think about that a lot? Like, do you miss covering UFC? You're where you're supposed to be, of course.
Yeah.
Same with you. But, you know, when you think about what you used to do, what you guys used to cover, do you think about it sometimes? Do you miss it?
This week actually is the first time in a long time the feelings of missing it have been conjured up a little bit with the Ronda Rousey news. Like, a big fight announcement like that, and even though it's not a UFC event, like those were, it made you feel alive. Like everything stopped. Like the promotion to it, like when a fight got finalized like that, like a Conor McGregor fight, a John Jones fight, like it was an exhilarating thing to do. Like on a fight night, everything was on the line in that moment for that person. Their entire course of their career was going to change in 15 or 25 minutes. And that's different than football, which is like this constant build up throughout the season. Plus, it was just a different gig in a city that I didn't freeze my ass off in for 6 months of the year. So I definitely missed that part of it.
It matters, man.
It does. I've been taking vitamin D3 and K supplements to try to help my mood a little bit during these gray days.
I don't think people who've never lived in the South or the West or warm weather can really understand the difference.
Yeah.
And just in vibes and moods when it's just nice out. when we live in Buffalo and you go 3-4 weeks at a time with literally not a drop of sunshine. I know I'm sounding like a little whiny bitch to a lot of people right now. I get it. It's okay. I am. I'll be the first to admit it. These winters have just been rough to me. But anyway, Matt, do you miss covering football?
Less and less. I feel like I get a taste of it, and so it's like if I miss it, I can just go over. And, the lines are blurred a little bit where they don't mind if I have an idea and pop over. I think around playoff big moments you miss it, right? Like Sean McDermott gets fired, or they're in the playoffs, and it's like, you want to weigh in, but sometimes it's difficult. Like when all that stuff was happening with the Bills, or like playoffs were happening, like the Sabres it was busy, and like the schedule this year has been nuts. Like they're playing like seems like every other night, and they were on a hot streak, and they had just fired the GM, and so it's like I can't take my eye off the ball here. But it's like there is that instinct as a reporter to just want to kind of be in on every big story, especially in a town like Buffalo where there's only 2 big teams, only 2 pro teams, not discounting the Bandits, obviously, because I know there's going to be people commenting when I say that. But like the 2 big 4, right?
Yeah.
You can conceivably do both. And so it's something that I think when I came back, I thought it'd be a little bit easier maybe to be like, it's just hard to really feel like you're owning a beat and also do the other stuff and do it at the level that you're comfortable with. So I love covering hockey, and like the longer the amount of time I spend in the sport, like the more people I meet. Like I love our hockey staff at the Athletic, and just like a lot of good people, in the sport. So I love watching hockey. I grew up playing and love doing the show with Chris. And so I feel like as more time passes, there's more like you feel what I missed at first, what I realize now, what I missed was like feeling entrenched in a beat. Like I was on the Bills for so long, and you lose that, and you're like, oh, I maybe shouldn't have taken that for granted, because that's a hard thing to build up. The feeling like you have some trust with your readers and sources and stuff. And I feel like I'm getting there on the Sabres. It's year 4 now, right? So I feel like I'm getting closer to that point, and that makes me kind of forget, about covering football a little bit.
This has become pretty much a sports media conversation tonight, which is what I wanted. This is the stuff, again, that I love on this show. I'm here with 2 pros. You've had lots of interviews before, whether it was a podcast, whether it was for a written story. What's the challenges when you interview somebody and that person, either they don't want to talk or they don't talk well, and you're not getting what you hope to get out of it, and you kind of got to be caught in the moment and adjust on the fly? What are some of the challenges that come with, not every guest you have on Shout is just going to be able to flow. You ask a question and you're off and running, or same thing with you and Chris on a podcast side, or again, a written story. But what's the challenges? How do you get through when you have a tough interview and you get it, in your mind that it's not going the way that you hope to?
I think the longer you're in the business, the more you start to understand that it's not all about the one singular interview. There's other ways to the story, or there's other ways. Like, if I just use a locker room setting, for instance, like I'm not ever going to walk up to James Cook for a story idea and get enough from James Cook to write that story. I know that going into it, right? So I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket. The good reporters are able to accumulate enough for a story from other sources to be able to tell the story that they want to tell, and knowing the room and being able to play it that way. On a podcast, like, I think you just got to like really reach into everything that you know to try to redirect the conversation. Yeah. Because everybody's got something, for the most part, that they want to talk about. Yeah. And if it doesn't seem like you're talking about something that they want to talk about, you got to find it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When I was a lot less experienced in this, I was blogging, and I'll never forget this. I did an interview with Daryl Talley, and he was awesome. I'd ask him a question. It was a great give and take, great interview. And maybe I got a little overconfident, thought I was too good at it. Remember Josh Reed, not from Channel 4.
Yeah, the receiver.
The receiver.
Yeah.
Good guy. One-word answers, two-word answers. And I thought I had enough questions, and about a minute and a half in the interview, I just never felt so stupid in my life.
Right.
It's like, I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to do. Have you encountered people like that? Again, you'll know how to make an interview into something, but sometimes it's just not there.
Yeah, I feel like you need those too, like when you're starting out, to be like, okay, that's like the thing I was afraid of, and I'm still alive, right? Like,
sure,
who cares, right? Like, one of my first days on the job for Syracuse.com, they sent me out to, I think Andre Reed was doing like a football camp or something, or he was at somebody's football camp, and like I was fresh out of college. I looked incredibly young because I was incredibly young. Andre Reed had no idea who the hell I was, had no interest in talking to me, and it was in and out and very quickly, and called my editor. I was like, not much meat on the bone here. That same summer, though, sort of a lesson in like, okay, even if it's not going well, our editor, Hank Doman, who we talked about the last time we were on, noticed that on social media, the old Bills kicker, Dan Carpenter, everybody was saying how much he looked like Kid Rock, and people were calling him Kick Rock. And he's like, we should do a story on this. And I was like, I guess. Like, like, we'll see, right? And I went up to Dan Carpenter, and I was like, hey, Dan, how's it going? Introduced myself, and like, here I am, like, this is like the first thing I'm talking to Dan Carpenter about. I'm like, hey, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a lot of people, like, calling you Kick Rock. Like, have you seen this? No. I'm like, okay, well, they're calling you that because they think you look like Kid Rock. Have you ever heard that before? No. What do you think about it? I don't know. And I'm just like, I'm going and going, I'm trying, and it's like, he's either pissed off by this, so like he does not like the comparisons, which if that's the case, I'm like, get a haircut then, bud. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is a pretty simple solution. But the lesson of it to me was like, okay, this guy maybe thinks I'm an asshole, and he barely said anything, but it's actually kind of a funny blog anyways. It's like, here's what Dan Carpenter thinks of all you guys calling him Kick Rock. Doesn't seem like a big fan of it. So like, you take what you get and you make it into something and move on. Like, somebody told me once, like, when I was real young, and it was like, oh, this guy's not good to work with, or this guy, it's like, somebody else will be, right?
Right.
It's a 53-person locker room. That guy doesn't like you. Maybe the next guy will. Maybe somebody, like, there's over 100 people who work for every NFL team, and probably dozens who work for every NHL team. Like, move on to the next one. Like, they don't all have to like you.
I still think that Jordan Phillips doesn't like me, but every time I talk to him, he talks to me, and like, they're not like, I think he's better with other people.
He's great.
Right.
Every time I go in, it's like, oh, they re-signed Jordan Phillips. I got to go back over there.
I just get the sense he doesn't like me, but it doesn't change the fact that like I work at that relationship, right?
Yeah.
It's so funny you talk about like a story idea that pops up that you're like, okay, right? Did I ever tell you the sweet potato story that I ended up doing?
I don't think so.
So remember a couple years ago when that one Bills fan started bringing in a sweet potato into the game with him and stuffing it in his pocket?
Yeah.
Because it was in the back of his truck, and he just put it in his pocket. And the one game he went in, he realized it was in there. So he started taking selfies with it. And it became like this movement on Twitter, like, you got to bring the sweet potato in it. And then he ended up bringing it to the Kansas City Chiefs game. They were talking about Kansas City restaurants were not going to let him buy. They were not going to sell sweet potatoes to Bills fans. So my editor at the time, Chris Baker, he's like, dude, you got to chase this story down. Like, we got to get the origin story of what happened. Because why is sweet potatoes, why are they trending on Twitter about Bills Mafia? And I just remember on the other side of the phone being like, Bills are about to play the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs, and you want me to chase a story about a freaking sweet potato. I ended up tracking down the Bills fan. We talked for 20 minutes. He gives me phone numbers of people to call at different areas of the life cycle of the story. I end up writing a 1,000-word post. To this day, I think it did over 1 million views. Like, the most read thing I've ever done on New York Upstate or Syracuse.com. And Chris Baker, to his credit, was like, Just go right about the sweet potato.
Well, it's the best quality of an editor is they're constantly throwing that stuff out. And some of it seems silly and some of it seems, but that happens all the time at our company where it's like, you see that viral moment on Twitter, oh, that guy's reading a book at the Florida State game. Like, what the hell's going on there? And the next morning, it happened this fall. I was watching Mizzou. I forget who they were playing. Maybe they were playing against Kansas. Like, and the guy who went out to do like the charity kick, instead of trying to kick it through the uprights, he like took his shirt off and it said like FKU, and he kicked it at the Kansas sideline. And I was like, I need to hear from this guy. And sure enough, we had somebody at the game, and there was a story the next morning from that guy. So it's like, yeah, a lot of times the most interesting story is definitely, and you would think, especially, we fall into that trap of thinking, oh, it's Bills Chiefs, it's the AFC Championship. I need to spend all my energy doing what? Predicting what's going to, like, you know what I mean? Adding
Angles
to the
of the game.
Stories when you could have the one that's different. You know, that's what you want is like that different, and it's hard to do because it might miss, right? You might be the asshole who spent 3 hours, you know, writing about sweet potatoes.
And I think most people probably still thought that because they didn't see the metrics on it.
But like you're like, wow, like it might not work. It takes a little bit of, you know, courage, but it can work out.
Yeah.
I got two quick questions, and then we'll put a wrap on this. Where's Sonny Red? And again, I love this place. Food's awesome. This is a bar, though, okay? And
they're going to kick us out.
There's adults here having
doesn't
adult
wrap us
beverages.
up,
So this doesn't fit this place specifically, but let's say we're at a family restaurant or something and we're doing this show. This has been pretty much an entire sports media conversation tonight anyway, which, again, I love that. You've been asked this, I'm sure, both of you, plenty of times. I'll try to frame it a little different, though. Say an 18, 19-year-old boy or girl right now watch this show. They love what you guys do. They're interested. They want to do what you do. They want to get into this as a career. My question, one or both of you can answer this. I want you to give me one thing that you would tell them that would make them definitely want to pursue this, and give them one pitfall or something that may give them pause to get and do what you do for a living. I'm not saying something that's necessarily terrible, but like at least a challenge, you know, to what you do, because not everything is perfect, and we all know that, no matter what job you have. But if some youngster comes, they want to get into this business and they want to get some advice from the both of you. What do you tell them?
There's no escalator to these jobs, covering the Sabres, covering the Bills.
No.
You're not just going to graduate college, get on an escalator, and have it just zoom you all the way up to the top floor. You're going to have to take the stairs.
Sure.
And there's going to be stops. There's going to be horrible stops. Like, in the moment when I was working at the Tonawanda News, out of college, I had just won a national award for a feature story that I wrote on a basketball player at UB. I was the editor-in-chief of the student newspaper. I was runner-up for Media Leader of the Year through another organization that my staff voted on. I was feeling myself, dude. Like, I was ready to go to the moon. And then I'm like in this garage in North Tonawanda covering, no offense to any of the schools that I was covering, like all these different schools. And I'm like working Friday and Saturday nights till 2 a.m, making $9 an hour. And I was like, did I take a wrong turn here? But I think back to it now, like I wouldn't be here today without all those different moments. Like that led me to, I didn't know about it at the time, MMA was illegal in New York State, professional MMA. Only thing that was legal was amateur shows. The top amateur outfit in New York State was in Tonawanda at Rainbow Rink, Victory MMA. Mm-hmm. I fell in with those guys. I started covering that as a beat in Tonawanda, and all of that work led me to the UFC, and I would have never probably been here. So I think a lot of students get into this thing, young adults, they want to try to fast track it. But you need to learn how to do this job truly before you get in the seat. Because now, like we've talked about on the show, social media, comments, the 24-hour news cycle, it's never been a more pressure-packed job that you have to be really prepared for when you get in this seat and you get in that chair and you're writing the stories and you're doing the podcast and you're in the locker rooms. Because if you're not, and if you don't take the time to get ready, it's going to be a tough job.
Yeah.
I think the things I love about it, like building over the years, what I've found that I like, you get into it for certain reasons, right? And because you love sports, or you get to go to games or whatever. But like building a real relationship with an audience is a pretty cool thing.
Sure.
Like it's at times sports can feel trivial, right? Because there's a lot more important things that I could be covering that would maybe make a bigger difference. But then there's a lot of times where you realize, especially in a place like Buffalo, how much sports mean to people, and the diversion, whatever it is for people, that, it's such a big part of their life that being able to be a small part of that is a pretty cool feeling. And it's something that keeps me going and keeps me, like, for a team like the Sabres too, where a lot of down years, like the people that were still following that team, like I felt such a responsibility to those people, like the people that are still, like a good amount of people, like enough people to make the beat worthwhile at the Athletic, like from a business standpoint, like, and I felt so beholden to those people. And I think if I were to think about like the drawbacks, like I think there's pros and cons to the schedule. Like we have great flexibility in a lot of ways, right? Like I don't have to be in the office at 8 a.m. I don't have to, nobody's really monitoring my every move, like as long as I'm getting my work done on time. But the schedule can also be very rigid, right? Like Sabres are playing tonight, like I'm working, right? Like rare exceptions, because it's an 82-game season. With football, it's like even fewer exceptions, right? Like you're not missing games too often.
I've not missed a single game since I started covering the team.
Yeah.
Like I missed weddings and stuff covering football. This fall went to my cousin's wedding and missed the Sabres game. Maybe it's because I'm getting older and I'm like, I realize, there's 82 games, so like I can miss one. But I think that part of it, like there's pros and cons, but maybe what you mentioned about like social media, and I don't even know if it's pressure, but just like the fact that it's like, it is sort of a 24/7 type of thing, which people might not realize, but you do have to be feeding the beast constantly in this digital era that we live in. Like people want stories. Like there's always, the shelf life of a really good story is so quick.
Yeah.
Like the dopamine hit from dropping a really good story is like that, because people want the next one. They wake up on Tuesday morning and they refresh their Athletic app and they're like, what do you got for me today? What have you done for me lately? And that part can eat at you if you let it, but you get used to it over time.
You get into this game for like, I think back to myself as a kid, I'd call into WGR, I'd have a fire take in my own head, right? And I'd want to just like let it out and just see what people think about it. And if there's any type of positive feedback, and the guy that really gave me the most was Art Wander when I would call his show back in the day. And I became really addicted to that, even subconsciously. Like that's what I think I really got into this for. Is like I wanted what I thought about sports to be shared with a collective. What you don't really realize is like, what's it going to be like when a whole shitload of people think what you think is the stupidest thing they heard that week. And that's something that you're always dealing with. And it can be as small as a one-sentence tweet that could go viral. Or suggesting that maybe the Bills think about trading Deion Dawkins, and half the fan base just absolutely lose their shit with you. And that's okay, right? Yeah. I'm to a point in my career where I'm more than comfortable with that. I'm comfortable going into the locker room and talking to Deion about it. All of it, right? But you better know that's part of the gig before you get here, because it'll jar you if you don't.
That's a great point, and we'll end it there too. It's easy. Not saying it's easy. A lot of people can sit there with a microphone and an audience and say whatever they want to say. Going into a locker room and owning what you say or what you write is kind of a different story. We'll leave it at that. But anyway, this was awesome.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're at almost 2 hours. You gotta press the stop button at some point.
I saw it. Look at this,
This is
dude.
our second show. The first one didn't
I was only on page 2, dude. I had another whole page still to go. Oh, but I feel like we're at the Oscars right now. They're turning up the jukebox. They're like, that's their way of playing us off. So, gonna end it there. Again, 2 of the very best: Matt Parrino, Matthew Fairburn, a great way for me, selfishly, to be able to have an 8th year anniversary episode here.
How many shows have I been on, by the way?
A lot.
More than 20, you think, live?
Definitely more than 20.
Are you on payroll?
I'm not on payroll, and I don't even have a damn Talking Buffalo hoodie.
That's tough.
Wow, one dog, one bone over here, I guess.
This is episode 1,253.
Wow.
Yeah, so man, it's been really cool. And part of the reason why is because I get to have guys like you on all the time. So appreciate you guys very much. Appreciate everybody watching and listening whenever you catch this. Thank you very much for watching, for listening. Be back. Brand new show coming.